More than 3,000 civilians were killed in Ba Chuc. Even today, visitors can stand before glass displays containing thousands of preserved skulls and human remains collected after the massacre. They are not movie props. They are not legends. They are silent witnesses to one of the darkest war crimes ever committed on Vietnamese soil. Imagine walking into a peaceful village near the border of Vietnam and Cambodia. The fields are green. Children are playing. Farmers are working under the sun. Then imagine that within days, that entire world is transformed into a landscape of terror. How could an ordinary village become a place remembered for mass murder? Why were thousands of innocent people targeted? And why do so many people outside Vietnam know so little about what happened there? To answer those questions, we have to travel back to the late 1970s. At that time, Cambodia was ruled by the Khmer Rouge under the leadership of Pol Pot. The regime pursued an extreme revolutionary vision. Cities were emptied. Millions were forced into labor camps. Fear became a tool of government. Suspicion became a death sentence. But the violence did not stop inside Cambodia. Tensions between the Khmer Rouge and Vietnam grew increasingly dangerous. Border clashes became more frequent. Villages along the frontier began experiencing attacks. Started as military hostility, gradually expanded into something far more horrifying. Then came April of 1978. Chuc, a rural community in Vietnam's Anh province, sat close to the Cambodian border. Its people were farmers, merchants, monks, mothers, fathers, and children. They were not soldiers preparing for battle. They were civilians trying to live ordinary lives. When Khmer Rouge forces crossed into the area, terror followed. The attack lasted for days. People fled in panic. Families ran from their homes, searching for safety. Some hid in fields. Others hid inside temples, churches, and caves. Many believed sacred places would protect them. They were wrong. Witness accounts describe civilians being hunted relentlessly. Entire families were trapped. Elderly people were killed. Women were killed. Children were killed. People hiding in religious sites were killed. The village became a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. As the violence intensified, fear spread through every corner of Ba Chuc. Survivors later recalled hearing screams throughout the night. They remembered hiding without food or water. They remembered not knowing whether the next hour would be their last. One dramatic chapter unfolded at the Tam Bu Pagoda and nearby religious compounds. Desperate villagers crowded into these locations, hoping for refuge. Instead, many became trapped. The places that symbolized peace suddenly became scenes of unimaginable suffering. Meanwhile, others fled toward mountain caves. The caves appeared to offer protection. Narrow entrances and rocky terrain seemed capable of shielding civilians from danger. Families squeezed into dark spaces, holding their children close, praying silently that the attackers would move on. The danger followed them there as well. For many trapped inside, survival became a desperate struggle against fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty. As the days passed, the scale of the catastrophe grew larger and larger. Bodies were left throughout the village. Homes stood abandoned. Entire family lines disappeared. Communities that had existed for generations were shattered in less than a week. When the violence finally ended, the devastation became impossible to ignore. Investigators and local authorities began documenting what had happened. The evidence was overwhelming. Human remains were recovered across the area. Survivors provided testimony. Buildings bore the scars of the attack. The numbers were staggering. More than 3,000 civilians had lost their lives. Think about that for a moment. This was not a battlefield crowded with armies. This was a village. A village. Community almost erased. Yet the horror of Ba Chuc is not measured only by statistics. Statistics can feel distant. Makes the tragedy unforgettable are the personal stories hidden behind every number. A mother who never returned home. A child separated from family forever. A farmer who left for work and never came back. An entire generation carrying memories too painful to describe. Survivors, the massacre did not end when the attackers left. The trauma continued for years. Many spent the rest of their lives remembering faces, voices, and final moments they wished they could forget. And then came another shocking reality. The physical evidence remained. Rather than allowing the victims to vanish into history, efforts were made to preserve proof of what occurred. Human remains recovered from the massacre were carefully collected and displayed as historical evidence. Visitors today can still see thousands of skulls and bones preserved at memorial sites in Ba Chuc. The experience is deeply unsettling. Rows of skulls stare silently through glass cases. Each one belonged to a real person. Each one represents a life interrupted. Each one serves as a reminder that historical atrocities are not abstract concepts found only in textbooks. They happened to real people. They happened here. The massacre also played a significant role in the broader conflict between Vietnam and the Khmer Rouge regime. The attack strengthened the perception that border violence had become intolerable. Events like Ba Chuc contributed to decisions that would eventually lead to a larger military confrontation between the two countries. History often focuses on governments, armies, and political leaders. Ba Chuc reminds us that ordinary civilians usually pay the highest price. The people who suffered there were not making strategic decisions. They were not negotiating treaties. They were not commanding troops. They were trying to live their lives. That is what makes the story so haunting. Even decades later, visitors continue to arrive. Students walk through the memorials. Historians examine the evidence. Families pay respects to victims they never personally knew. The skulls remain. The memorials remain. The warnings remain. Because places like Ba Chuc force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Civilization can appear stable until hatred, extremism, and violence are allowed to grow unchecked. When that happens, ordinary villages can become symbols of unimaginable tragedy. Today, the fields around Ba Chuc are peaceful again. Children laugh. Farmers work the land. Continues. But beneath that peace lies memory, a memory preserved in monuments, a memory preserved in testimony, a memory preserved in thousands of silent skulls that still watch from behind glass. And perhaps that is the most chilling part of all. The victims can no longer tell their stories. So the evidence tells the story for them. Every skull, every bone, every name remembered. A warning from history that should never be ignored, and a reminder that the people of Ba Chuc must never be forgotten.